Welcome to Brainstorm 9000.
Exercise gives you endorphins. Endorphins make you happy. And happy people just don't shoot their husbands.
Has anybody shot their husband recently?
That is a quote about the science of exercise from the classic early 2000s film Legally Blonde, starring Reese Witherspoon.
I have to admit, I've never seen it. My name is Dr. Schultz. I'm a psychiatrist. They're all crazy.
And my name is Master McMaster.
Which is a fun name that Jane McMaster decided to award herself with because she has master's degree in philosophy.
Okay, yeah.
And I decided we should call me Dr. Schultz, or maybe she decided because I'm a real doctor. Meaning I'm an MD, how real I am.
You know, technically I'm a real master.
Yes. Of all the McMasters and our podcast.
Yes, and our podcast that you're currently listening to is Brainstorm 9000, the podcast where we talk about your brain and also other things.
So when you run or lift weights or do a headstand, you are using your head.
Yes, you are using your brain and you're also benefiting your brain.
Maybe you'd be surprised, maybe not, to learn that actually all the cool stuff that we talk about when it comes to the Greeks inventing the Olympics and people being very fit in the ancient world was thoroughly forgotten for many, many years and was revived somewhere at the cutting edge between the 19th and the 20th century, when all of a sudden a lot of things happened all at the same time. So we all know, without probably any need for detailed discussion, that exercise is good for you, but of course we are going to talk about the data and the science behind it. But surprisingly, a lot of people didn't know about it that much. Like, for example, if you read Sherlock Holmes stories, or at least saw a couple of episodes of a very interesting British version of it, you know that, for example, Sherlock Holmes used to smoke a pipe.
Ah, yes.
Right, and I think Dr. Watson also smoked, I don't remember clearly. And of course, Sherlock Holmes did cocaine, so did Freud, and none of these people exercised, although my understanding is that Sherlock Holmes knew boxing pretty well.
You know, I don't know that. I would have to look it up.
Yes. So a few things happened. One of the grandmasters of yoga decided at the end of the 19th century that he wants to come to the Western world and enlighten them. His name was Swami Vivekananda.
Oh, yes, I've heard of him.
And that's how modern yoga came to the Western world.
Exercise for your body and your spirit.
Yes, of course, it became very popular due to his personality at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, especially in Europe. People flocked around him, and then it kind of went away. But at that same time, gymnastics was developing very rapidly, at least in Europe. Not in a way that we know it now, not as a competition, but as regular daily exercise. It became very popular in the Soviet Union, so it's 1919, 1920s. I hate to say it to you, but Hitler's Nazi Germany also propagated this type of exercise.
Ah.
While it all was happening, here in the United States, a celebrity was born. His name was Jack LaLanne.
Jack LaLanne.
Yes, there is a way to pronounce it in a French way, but he was born and raised here. In 1936, he opened the nation's first health and fitness club in Oakland, California. You'd be surprised to know that doctors actually advised their patients against going there. Jack LaLanne is known to say, "People thought I was a charlatan and a nut." That sounds familiar. The doctors were against me. They said that working out with weights would give people heart attacks and they would lose their sex drive.
Really?
Not
People
true.
thought that?
Yes.
I feel like the opposite is true.
Absolutely. It is true. He wasn't just some kind of a nut celebrity who decided to make people exercise. He invented a number of machines, for example, a pulling machine and a very famous Smith machine. I don't know why it's called Smith. He invented it, Jack LaLanne. So when you go to the gym and you see two vertical rails on which there is a large barbell, and people either sit on a bench and lift in a very controlled fashion, or they what is called bench, meaning lay on a bench and then push up and pull down weights. It protects you from sudden movements and makes it very safe.
Yes, I have seen these machines before. I have seen people on the machines. I have not been one of the people on them.
Well, I had my portion, and we can talk about it anytime you want to, of doing all this stuff since very young age. So he was very successful. He was a very charismatic guy, died recently at age 96, was still lifting, and actually even had an informal competition with 21 years old Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think Jack LaLanne at the time was in his late 50s, and Arnold Schwarzenegger lost and called Jack LaLanne an animal, meaning he's like an animal. I'm trying to fake a German Austrian accent here.
That's pretty good.
Yoga also kind of faded away in the Western world and was tremendously popularized by the Beatles.
Ah, yes.
When they went to Rishikesh to study with Maharishi. This ashram is now kind of dilapidated in a part of Rishikesh which is not very safe, but young people from all over the world come to visit and do graffiti. It's now a new tradition there. So they studied meditation with him, but yoga became a point of interest, and in the 60s, a lot of yoga teachers came not only to the United States, but also to Europe and even to communist Russia. My first yoga teacher actually studied with one of these people. They conducted a bunch of research at that time. Another important development was in the 60s, when out of all the places, you'll be surprised to know, New Zealand developed jogging. I mean, jogging, can you say it with a British accent, Master McMaster?
Jogging?
Yes. Was first mentioned actually in literature by Shakespeare. So this word was created probably in England in the 16th century and was probably very popular, but meant mostly running away.
Go for a jog.
Yes, meaning get the hell out of here. It was made popular by a coach whose name was Arthur, I guess either Lydiard or Lydiard, Lydiard. So how would you say it?
Your guess is as good as mine on this one.
Okay, so he started this group in the early 60s, and the New Zealand Herald in February 1962 published a large article about a group of enthusiasts who were called an Auckland Joggers Club. And then University of Oregon, so that's the United States, in case somebody doesn't know that, who was a track coach, Bill Bowerman, came to Lillard in 1962, jogged with him and his group. In 63, started a club and published a book in 1966, which was called Jogging. I read it actually when I was in the Soviet Union in Russian.
Really?
And jogging became popular. Interestingly, people were jogging in regular shoes, attaching thick layers of rubber, because New Zealand apparently is very well paved and it wasn't that healthy. But this American coach also was instrumental in developing a first line of sneakers.
Really?
So sneakers are a product of jogging. So I guess I covered most of the things. So people run or jog, right? Jogging means going at the speed less than 10 miles an hour. When I was jogging, I was probably going like 1 mile per hour.
Yeah, I can jog. I can jog for probably 3 minutes without getting super tired and wanting to stop.
Right. So I remember this feeling when I ran or jogged for about a little bit more than half an hour. I would feel extremely happy. It turns out that that's how long it takes for beta endorphin to get released in our brain.
Ah.
A hormone of pleasure.
Yes.
Similar in structure to natural opioids. It is a naturally produced by our brain opiate. That's why another reason, that's why doing opiates is not such a good idea, because then the brain decides, the hell with it, I'm not going to make my own, and life becomes miserable. So what do people do, Master McMaster, nowadays? What kind of exercises you think are popular?
There's so many different kinds of exercises. I actually mentioned before there's some weird ones
Like
that
what?
I want to try. So they have the aerial yoga with these swings that you go on. So you're suspended in the air and doing poses. It looks really fun.
Asanas. Pseudo asanas. Okay.
And there's a like stripper pole dancing.
Yes, that's big even in Russia. Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
As an exercise.
Yeah.
Yes.
It seems like a fun exercise. You really have to be acrobatic to spin around on one of those things.
Well, I can tell you, I do take subway, and about a month and a half ago, I saw a group of teenagers dancing using subway poles.
I see them all the time. Showtime.
Unbelievable, actually.
Yeah. Very impressive.
Yes.
So I am not a big exerciser, although after doing the research for this episode, I think I'm going to have to change that. But I guess some of the most popular things right now are, yoga, hot yoga, kickboxing, Pilates, CrossFit. Everyone's obsessed with CrossFit.
Well, that's a cult.
Yeah.
It's probably a good cult, but it is a cult.
Uh-huh. I just downloaded this fitness app that I've been using off and on that has little workouts scheduled for you. And they're all just kind of different kinds of series of reps. But there's one of them called a paleo workout. The structure of the exercise is supposed to be like that of our ancestors, or what we think their exercise might have been, which is basically jogging or running.
Right.
And then doing something like push-ups or pull-ups or bicycle kicks, just a series of I don't know. When I was doing it, it made sense. I was like, oh yeah, I guess I could see a human ancestor, running from a predator and then climbing something and then running over here and then stabbing an animal, something like that.
So maybe it makes more sense to write not on the computer and not using a pen, but just take a little stone, sharpen it with another stone, then take a larger stone and start imprinting the letters on a larger stone, right? And maybe it's much better and authentic, because that's what humans were doing allegedly when they just invented the letters.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the same thing.
Or maybe it's better to do it in a sophisticated way, typing on your computer. So I'm trying in the ironic way to say that actually there are extremely sophisticated, complex methods of exercise. Of course, since I'm a yoga fanatic, it would be yoga. It would be, of course, Tai Chi, another pretty ancient way, because they are somehow, and I'm not going to get into the argument with the brains of the internet and Master McMaster, how it was, in quotes, invented. People figured out a way to actually make most, if not all, of the parts of our body, including the brain, to exercise in a way that is very beneficial.
Well, and so there are some theories about, how exercise evolved and how that's related to the modern brain and the prefrontal cortex. And, obviously, to a certain extent, it's just kind of speculation, but I think it's interesting. So New York University professor Rodolfo Linus thinks that thinking is the evolutionary internalization of movement, meaning that humans evolved to move, and the movements of our early ancestors propelled our brains to grow, especially the prefrontal cortex, which, as we all know, is associated with cognitive behavior, decision-making, personality expression, and controlling physical actions. It's like the executive center of the brain.
Actually, when we talk about movement, we mostly talk about a motor strip that is located at the border between the prefrontal cortex and everything else, and where there is this famous, and if people didn't know about it, I'll tell them, they call it homunculus. So
homunculus.
Yes, it's kind of like a projection of a human being with overrepresented face, hands. Interestingly enough, one of the methods of treatment of depression, for example, has to do with affecting this motor strip, TMS and ECT. So TMS is transcranial magnetic stimulation. ECT is electric convulsive therapy. So what else do people think, Master McMaster?
Well, so, there are a lot of different theories about different ways that exercise affects your brain for the better.
Right.
So there are a bunch of different areas that are thought to be affected by exercise. So the general categories are alertness and perception, movement and coordination, memory, learning, creativity and imagination, mental health, and having a youthful brain. So just kind of general cognitive functioning. So that's kind of the general overview of things that it's meant to affect, which is why I think I want to get back into it. Not that I was ever really totally into it to begin with.
What else do people say?
So one of the central theories is that our brains become more active when we are active physically, which causes, neurons to fire in unison sometimes and create certain kinds of brain waves, the high frequency brain waves, beta. So, as far as like specific faculties go for attention, there have been a bunch of different, kinds of studies that show that exercise can improve your attention span. And there was this one study at the University of Berlin, actually, that shows that even like the smallest amount of exercise can help your attention span. The study that they did with German teenagers was that 10 minutes of bouncing 2 balls at the same time improved the attention span.
Yeah, so I would like to make certain things clear. Any activity of any kind is going to be recorded on EEG as an increased beta wave activity. Any kind of exercise that requires coordination is going to make, so to speak, the brain pay significantly more attention. The brain is not isolated from the rest of the body. It's integrated inside of our body. I mean, somebody like me would say that our body serves the brain, but somebody else can say that the brain serves the body. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship. The brain wouldn't be sitting in the head if it wouldn't benefit from it. I know that I'm talking about the brain as if it's a separate entity, and there is a train of thought and a school of thought that talks about it like that. And the body wouldn't have the brain if it wouldn't need it, right? So they cannot exist without each other. And of course, healthy brain means healthy body, and healthy body means healthy brain. During the exercise, if it's well designed, and I honestly don't know much about paleo exercise, and I don't want to say that it's ridiculous, it's just I don't know why is it better than anything else that we already have, other than yet promoting another kind of business. Remember there used to be like a big dancing fad? I forget how it's called.
Jazzercise?
More popular.
Roomba?
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's called
Roomba? I think
No.
it's called Roomba.
No. Zumba.
Zumba! Oh, that's right. The Roomba is that...
The dance.
The Roomba is the little automated vacuum cleaner. Zumba is the dance.
Well, Roomba is also a dance, but Roomba is the dance. Zumba was a very, very popular type of exercise when Latino music would play and people make a lot of dance movements. The guy who invented it was a very charismatic person, and it all looked very intense and very difficult. So I'm not a big expert in Zumba, but it seems to me, based on how little now people talk about it, that it kind of went away. Actually, I don't know whether your generation knows about him, but there is a person whose name is Richard Simmons.
Yes, of course I know about him.
Who actually was one of the celebrities, together with Jane Fonda, out of all the people, who promoted intense aerobic exercise. Jane Fonda was a face and a body of aerobics. There used to be aerobics. People still do aerobic exercises. And she was a person who promoted it. And of course, she benefited enormously from it. So Richard Simmons promoted exercising with music also. He also promoted a daily meal method that then became a base for a lot of other popular ways to diet. And dieting, I have to say, somehow has always been connected with exercising and vice versa.
The healthy lifestyle.
Have you ever met a personal trainer who would work with you?
I've never met a personal trainer.
So I met a few, both as a client and also, let's say, as a caregiver.
Okay.
And they begin their conversation with you about what you eat. So they try to optimize the way you eat so you can benefit enormously from exercise. They tell you that if you eat right and you take a certain type of supplements, your body is going to flourish. So the exercise industry is closely connected to the supplement industry and to a dieting industry. I would like to distinguish for our listeners, the brains of the internet, between doing sports professionally and taking it to an extreme and exercising for health. So, of course, professional sport in any shape or form is for a few chosen ones, and they are driven by the need to produce impressive results. I mean, we all know that people train like crazy. For example, professional bodybuilders train twice a day, 2 times a day.
Oh, God.
Each training session could be a couple of hours.
The horror.
They eat in a particular way. I used to lift in the gym. I mean, I did it for health, but a lot of people there were professional bodybuilders, and I can tell you the way they eat is extremely, it looks terrible. I mean, people eat 12 egg whites for breakfast, overload their bodies with protein, which cannot be consumed in these amounts. I mean, blah, blah, blah. There is a lot of stuff. So I find that this, and a lot of my colleagues find that this is unhealthy, but certainly working out for health is very good for you. And of course, I'm going to say that doing yoga or Tai Chi, even if you are doing it as a professional, meaning trying to become a yoga instructor, of course, it's very good for you. The problem with yoga is that it needs to be done on a daily basis, and it's kind of like a lifestyle. So there is kind of like a decaffeinated yoga, and I'm not trying to offend anybody here. It's just a joke. You say it correctly, Pilates. Have you ever done Pilates?
I have.
So how was your experience? What happens?
I didn't do the kind of Pilates that has all the complicated machinery.
Right.
I did a different one. It was like a college fitness class.
Right.
Lots of core strength.
Right.
It was fine. It was difficult. It was very difficult.
Yeah, but does it include working with machines or not necessarily?
I think there are technically 2 different kinds of Pilates.
So what was the kind you did?
One is just floor-based.
Right. So can you define for us what is the core in this system?
Your stomach area?
Right.
Your abs.
Right. So the abs and the lower back. Probably unbeknown to a lot of people, but probably beknown, right, to a lot of people who listen to us. Core is a center of attention in every single ancient practice I've ever come across. Tai Chi pays an enormous amount of attention to working with the core. In yoga, of course, most of the stuff that is done has to do with developing the core. Of course, in all the martial arts, which also could be part of a healthy exercise, right? If a person goes and does martial arts with an objective to be healthy and not with an objective to kill people, which actually is not accepted by martial arts because it's also a spiritual movement, it's also very healthy, and they pay a lot of attention to the core. Unfortunately, I have to tell you, in my observation, a lot of people who go to the gym, at least the male population, pay a lot of attention to their upper body, and very frequently have chicken legs and don't necessarily have very well-developed core.
Yeah.
Right? Do you agree?
Yeah, no, you're actually reminding me of this show, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Right.
They're all, the 2 of the main characters are always working out, and they're trying to impress each other. And they often have fights about oh, you only work out your glamour muscles and you know it.
Right. So maybe we should start talking a little bit more about what type of exercises is particularly good for the brain, right?
Yeah.
So the brain consumes about 20% of energy that our body produces. It consumes 20% of glucose that is consumed by us. The other part of the body that consumes 20% of glucose is actually our muscles.
Oh, that makes sense.
But I would not be afraid of the competition between the body and the brain. I mean, of course, if somebody takes it to the max and doesn't consume enough carbs, this is going to be an issue. So all the stuff that the brain needs is delivered to the brain by only one route. It's only one pipeline, right? I mean, there are many pipes going to the brain, 2 large in the front and many small ones in the back. But it's blood that brings all the stuff that the brain needs to be supplied with. Blood also takes it away, right? the concept is very simple. Arterial blood is something that comes to the organ, and the venous blood is something that brings stuff away, takes away stuff, usually something that the organ doesn't need. So, of course, if you exercise, you help your cardiovascular system, meaning your heart and your blood vessels, to strengthen, right? That's a common knowledge.
Make them work harder.
Right. So it's very beneficial to the brain because it means that it gets all the power supply it needs. Yes, it needs to share a little bit, but it's okay. Another important thing to realize, and Master McMaster mentioned it on numerous occasions already, is that exercise helps to develop much better coordination.
Right, yeah.
So coordination requires a participation of higher levels of our brain, and of course neocortex is also involved, at least partially. I mean, when we grab a cup to drink or we write, we don't necessarily intensely think about it, like let me extend my... But of course the entire brain participates. So of course it's a very good idea to improve your motor skills, meaning improve your coordination, and the brain is going to only say thank you to you.
Yeah, I recently heard that something as simple as brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand can be good for your brain in terms of like forming new connections or something.
I have no idea. I cannot say yes or no because this type of research has never been funded to the best of my knowledge, but maybe. I mean, any exercise is good for you. I also think that we forgot to mention one very important thing, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of doing something good for yourself.
Yeah.
Also makes people happy. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, CrossFitters are not even in the realm of this type of satisfaction because they work out to the extreme, right?
Yeah.
And I cannot say much about it because I've never done CrossFit. What I see in the gym when I come across people who do CrossFit, I can only envy the level of coordination and the strength and endurance that they can go through. It's quite amazing. By the way, a large number of people who do CrossFit are extremely advanced intellectually people. We are talking about computer programmers, system analysts, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that everybody else does not participate. I can tell you that when in Russia I went lifting when I was 18 to 20 years old. I did it pretty seriously. I mean, as an exercise, right? Not professionally. At least half of the people in the gym where I went were actually physicians, like literally doctors.
Now, do you think that this is a case of causation or correlation?
I think it's just a random coincidence, actually.
All right, so correlation.
Yeah, because they were huge and, out of proportion big people, but it's something for them to do. By the way, I don't know that you know the stats, certainly I don't, but probably more people than before spend their entire life sitting or laying down, right? Because a lot of people, I mean, you and I, our job presumes that we have to be sitting down unless you do all your work standing. I don't know. Well,
so some people have like standing desks, and some people have like standing desk treadmills.
Yes.
So that they can be walking while they're working. But yeah, especially in the past couple of decades, the most common work environment that you're going to see is a desk and a chair where you're sitting down for, the majority of your day, as opposed to maybe like 100 years ago, where instead of working in offices, most people were working outside, working in a factory, working on the farm.
Right, and the number of cars wasn't that large, and the number of devices. You know what? I took public transportation to work today. I can tell you it's amazing to me, and I'm one of the users, to see how many people are on their cell phone from the very beginning of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I find it totally crazy.
You're not?
No. I actually, and it's probably subject for yet another program for us to have, because I'll be very happy to share my meditation practice with people. I've been doing it for most of my life. But I actually spend time, if I get to sit, because it's dangerous when you stand, meditating on my way to work, and from my way to work, if it's a car and I have somebody in the car, we talk, we listen to our podcast.
Yes.
There needs to be a change of activity. I hear it all the time since I started my endless journey in thinking and talking about and researching the brain since a very young age, that change of activity is very good for you. So I totally believe it. And I think that any type of exercise is good for you. For example, any chance I get, I try to walk to my destinations.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many calories I spend, but I don't particularly care, because what's important is that it gives my body another perspective of how to use itself, right?
Yeah.
So when we sit, and for people who want to look good, the lower part of your body becomes very weak and unimpressive.
Yeah.
So exercising is a very good idea. Another thing that is similar to experiencing a deep sense of satisfaction from having something accomplished is a literal benefit that our body experiences after an extended period of time of exercise. So it is debatable, but the consensus is that after about 36 minutes of intense exercise, beta endorphins are released. And as I said before, they make us experience a sense of pleasure.
Yeah. Have you heard of what's called a runner's high?
Of course, I experienced it. I used to run. So when I was younger, I ran 3 miles every day, literally every day, 5 miles on Saturdays and 10 miles on Sundays. I did it for very, very many years, over 10 years. And I do remember that about half an hour or so into running, I would become very happy.
Yeah, actually, so I looked up some studies about this, and some research shows that even mice can experience this.
Right.
So in terms of what is the cause of the runner's high?
Right.
Some researchers have claimed that it's because, neurotransmitters that are kind of created by exercise are kind of magnified because, your brain is working overtime, your body's working overtime, lots of blood flow, things like that. But other researchers hypothesize that it's because exercise causes the endocannabinoid system, the receptors of cannabinoids from cannabis, to fire, which is pleasurable and pain-killing.
Meaning they say that we release natural cannabinoids ourselves?
Or something that responds to those receptors.
So are they saying that we are born with receptors to cannabis?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Possible. I'm not familiar with the studies about neurotransmitters. I'm going to say what I always say, and I don't say it because I want to be nasty. I just want to educate people. So look, to the best of our knowledge, at this point of the development of neurophysiological research, we believe that neurotransmitters are vital for transmitting the signal from one neuron to the other. So either they work, and then our brain is alive, or they don't, and then we are dead. In different parts of our brain, at any given millisecond, there could be an increase or decrease of a content of a particular neurotransmitter, depending on what's going on. So to say that exercise increases or decreases neurotransmitters is a speculation, but when we talk about the release of beta endorphins and whatever other things that the brain uses to communicate with the rest of the body, of course, it's going to be most likely very close to the truth.
Yeah, well, and aside from neurochemicals and stuff, there have been studies that show that exercise particularly affects certain areas of the brain.
Right.
So one example is the hippocampus, which we know is the core of the brain's learning and memory system. So a study at the University of Illinois, for example, found that exercise, and specifically aerobic exercise, really stimulates the hippocampus and contributes to the growth of the hippocampus in children, mainly.
Certain types of physical activity naturally are significantly more beneficial for developing prefrontal lobe activities and making it work in a significantly more intense way. Master McMaster, could you guess a couple?
To get the frontal lobe working better?
Yes, or more.
Specifically in exercise or in anything?
Physical activity.
Running?
Okay.
Playing a sport, maybe?
Yes. So team
basketball
sports, yeah. So basketball players are probably super smart because they have to make decisions in a split second.
Mm-hmm.
of course, to my huge surprise, when I started looking into it, football actually is American football is an extremely sophisticated game, as it turns out. Baseball, I'm still trying to understand. Apparently also requires a high level of sophistication. Hockey requires making quick decisions. I can tell you that actually if they didn't hit each other in the head that much, boxing would be also good. But unfortunately, boxing comes with a very high price tag for the brain.
Well, and
brain trauma.
Other sports like hockey and especially football, American
Right.
football, are also known for having a strong association with head trauma.
Yes. So it's good on one hand because you have to think really quick on your feet, but on the other hand, it's not very good for you.
It can be hazardous.
It can be hazardous. So about running, actually, I agree, but for a very interesting reason. People don't realize it, but our nose serves to a very large extent as a pump to provide significantly better perfusion for the frontal lobes of the brain, because the blood vessels that go in the neighborhood of our nasal cavities and then supply the brain with the blood, they are helped by creating inside of the nose negative pressure when you use it. So people didn't know about it, but you've heard it probably many times when you were little that you need to breathe with your nose, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you probably noticed that children who have adenoids, who walk with their mouths open, right?
Yeah.
Because you've seen children like that when you were in school. So
Mouth breathers.
yeah, but actually, if a little child is left untreated with large adenoids and continues not to use the nose, their intellectual development is going to miss a couple of milestones until they do it, and then they excel enormously. So running, especially when you use your nose, and you don't need to try it, is going to happen automatically, is also very good for you.
Huh.
So, of course, playing team sports also creates a tendency for people to cooperate and to coordinate what they do with each other. So it creates a sense of unity. Of course, after I saw my younger daughter playing field hockey, I'm not sure whether the statement is right or not, because different teams are very aggressive towards each other, as everybody knows.
Yeah.
So all around, I have to say that, of course, it would be silly to disagree that playing sports and exercising is good for the brain. Of course it is. And I would encourage our listeners to give it another thought, no pun intended.
Yeah, and if anyone needed more reasons to exercise, there are also some theories that exercise can help keep your brain young, or even, help make your brain sharper. So some studies say that exercising, for a certain amount of time, certain number of days per week, can stimulate neurogenesis, growth of new neurons, new connections between cells, just different kinds of growth factors. And of course, the biggest fear of getting older is your neurons are dying, and so you're losing your edge.
Yes. So what I would like to say that we spoke about so many positive things that exercise does to our brain, and I'm pretty sure that we missed probably about 1,000 others, that the only thing that I would like to say at the end to our audience is please keep your brains open to the exercise and get off your asses and finally do something different. Do something. Be somebody.
Yes, and I wanted to throw out there the idea of brain exercise. You can exercise your brain with, certain tasks and certain things.
It would be a very interesting topic for one of our podcasts. It's a huge, rapidly developing area of human activity.
Yeah, so we'll probably cover that in the future to give you other ways of keeping your brain healthy.
Yes. Have fun.
Okay, signing off, guys. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Brainstorm 9000. If you like us, love us, or marginally tolerate us, hey, go ahead and subscribe, rate, and give us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever the hell you listen to your podcasts.